Just like I promised, 6 o'clock. See if I can get my chat board up here. See who is all joining us today. So I'm gonna wait a couple minutes for you guys to log in. If you guys are watching, making those comments so I know you're out there. Can you guys hear me okay? See me okay? Just let me know, please. All right, so just gonna give this a few more minutes for other people to join in here. So we are doing a t-shirt giveaway today. And hey Jarns, hey man, how you doing there, buddy? So we're doing a t-shirt giveaway today for those that are watching. One of the stipulations to win the shirt is you just gotta watch, obviously, and make some comments and ask some questions. So you got to make at least one comment or a question or something. And somewheres in this live stream, I'm going to give you the rules of how to win my Elfster's t-shirt here. Custom made with the front logo by my good friend Shade Wright. And these are actual silhouettes of my rifles here. And it says America's one and only Homeland Security. And then I have my good old logo on the back. And just to let you know, I only have them in medium, large, XL, and double XL. So those sizes don't fit you, I'm sorry. So I think I'm gonna wait a little bit longer here, see who else joins in before we start. So I'm just going to quick recap what we've done so far to get us up to part 4 here. And first and foremost, we sorted the brass. I got 1,000 pieces of Lake City 5.56 brass, and we quick sorted that out for dings and crushed case mouths. We went and decapped all that, make sure we got those primers out. And just want to give you guys a quick tip while I'm still waiting for guys to log in here. Is if you guys have any dies, whether it's your sizing die or it's a decapping die, one quick tip here is if you want to keep your dies from rusting, put them in a Ziploc bag. And get some good old trusty WD-40 here and spray that right in the Ziploc bag. And get a chunk of cardboard in there or maybe a note card, soak that in WD-40 and put your dies right in that Ziploc bag and they will never rust on you. So I'm going to wait for a couple more people to log in here before we start. What else have we done to get up to this point? We cleaned the brass enough, at least about 1 hour, just to make sure that those the brass is clean enough to be sized. We also want to make sure the brass is clean enough for annealing purposes. That's really important. And we also want to give those popped out primer pockets more time to be cleaned so they are crystal clear by the time they get through the second round of cleanings there. So if you guys are watching, make those comments, especially if you want to win that t-shirt. If you got any questions, go ahead and let her rip so I can help you guys out in the reloading community. We also swaged these primer pockets and reamed them. You know, on the second round of cleaning that we're eventually going to do here after we size this brass to get the lube off, those little pins, those stainless steel pins, will really help smoothen out that swaged and ream primer pockets even more to make that seating those primers even more buttery smooth. So we also uniform the primer pockets, make sure that those primers seat just below flush. And the very recent post before this, or the most recent video, was annealing the brass with the anneal ease. And the reason why we did that is to, you know, increase the brass life. You get more consistent neck tension. And also, very important in this step, is to get consistent headspace bumps. So your headspace is spot on every time you pull your ram here. So if you guys are watching, let yourself be heard here so I can see who's watching here. Especially if you got any questions while we're going here, let her rip so I can help you guys out. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer here. So we got about 8 watching now. Surprised good old Michael Knisley's not logged in here talking crap. So yeah, what we're doing is we are reloading 200 pieces of 5.56 Lake City brass for my my Rock River Arms 20-inch varmint bull barrel in 5.56. Actually has a wild chamber on it. You know, what's kind of nice with a wild chamber is it can shoot both 5.56 and 223 comfortably without an oversized headspace. It gives more precision out of that firearm. So looks like good old Alex just logged in. Nice to see you there, bud. So let me just get this out of the way, and this kind of goes for all the parts. What I'm showing you guys is how I reload. I'm not telling you how you should reload. The ultimate decision, what you guys, is really up to you. I'm just showing you how I reload. You know, the ultimate decision that you guys make for your headspace and your particular firearm is completely up to you. So what I'm doing here is just showing you how I reload for my rifles. So, oh man, good old Michael just logged in. Looking again, blind man. That's awesome. So I'm going to wait just a little bit longer here. See if we can get a couple more guys logging in here, watching and making comments. So if you guys just logged in, we're giving away a t-shirt today. It's the Elfster's Rifles and Reloading t-shirt. And it has my custom-made logo with my actual gun silhouettes on the front. Friend Shade Wright made this logo. And we got the Elfster logo here. And later today, or later in this video, I'm going to tell you guys how you can win this. And you got to at least make a comment or ask a question in order to win this. So let's just get going here before it takes too long here. So before we do anything here, we need to make sure we lube this brass, because if you don't lube this brass, you're eventually going to learn how to use one of these, and that is a stuck case removal tool. And your brass gets stuck in your dies. Trust me, it's not fun, and sometimes not even this works. And it is a pain in the butt. Trust me, you want to make sure you lube that brass. And I've seen guys go through hell and back just try and get their brass out of their dies because they didn't lube it properly, they didn't lube at all. So super important that you guys do that. So so before we do anything here in terms of lubing and sizing this brass and getting this brass into its second and final wash in the stainless steel tumbling, we got to go over a really big fat white elephant in the room, and that is headspace. And I know headspace, at least for those guys, the guys that are new in the reloading community here, can be hands down one of the most frustrating topics of trying to learn how to reload. And I'm actually going to get up a diagram here. Can you guys make this out okay? For those guys that are absolutely new to reloading, some of you guys might be asked that question, what is headspace? And headspace is the measurement from your bolt face to the datum line, and that is the middle of the shoulder here. And that's where the shoulder of the brass touches the datum line of your chamber itself. And it's super important when you guys are sizing your brass that, especially for a semi-auto, you definitely got to have some type of headspace. No headspace in a semi-auto is not a good thing. With bolt actions, you can get away with it a little bit more. But headspace is, definitely a very important thing. And if you're not familiar with cartridges, this is called the datum line here, which is the halfway point of the shoulder itself. And that's where the brass actually contacts the chamber. And typically in a semi-auto, I like to bump my headspace from fireform brass 0.003 to 0.005 inches from fireform. For a bolt action, usually some guys have no headspace. They just try and fill it out with their bolt itself. That's kind of why I have this bolt action on my desk here. They'll do damn near no headspace, maybe 0.001 to 0.003. And get your comments back up here. Headspace is, in my opinion, one of the most important part of the whole reloading process. So now, if you have too little to no headspace, with a bolt action, when you're closing that bolt, if you have no headspace, your headspace is too long on your size brass, you won't even be able to close that bolt. And obviously you won't be able to feed that round. It's not going to chamber. And if you guys aren't getting consistent headspace bumps when you're sizing your brass, that's if you full length resize. And I'm going to go over that here in a little bit between full length resizing and neck sizing only. But obviously we're loading for a semi-automatic, so we're dealing with full length resizing. But it's really important to make sure your headspace is spot on. Now, if you have too little to no headspace in a semi-automatic, you don't get that luxury of filling the headspace to the bolt. I mean, obviously it's slammed home by force with your buffer and your buffer spring, and you don't get that luxury of feeling that tension, the headspace clearance that you have if you have little or no headspace at all. And if you have no headspace, or your headspace is too long in comparison to your chamber, especially when it comes to a semi-automatic, that round is going to get stuck in your chamber. And typically on like an AR, if you need to get that round out and it's stuck in your chamber because your headspace is too long, some guys point in a safe direction, and while they're pulling on the charging handle, they'll mortar the rifle or slam the buttstock down on their bench while pulling on that charging handle just to get that stuck round out of the chamber. And that is a very good sign that your headspace is not correct. So it's super important that your headspace is spot on. Now on the flip side, if you have way too much headspace, you're sizing your brass too much, and there's too much of a gap between, let me bring this back up here. If you have too much of if you bump your brass back too much and you got way too much headspace, what can happen is when you fire that round, obviously when they're using brass, that brass will expand and seal inside that chamber. And if it has to expand too far, you can get what's called case head separation, and that is very bad. That's when your rifle can literally explode. That bolt can come flying out of that action, and it can be very dangerous. So case head separation can be very, very dangerous if you don't have your headspace spot on. And that's why I'm telling you guys right now, I'm only showing you how I reload and not telling you how you should reload. And the amount that you bump your headspace back is 100% up to you guys. So I'm going to get your comments back up here. So let's see who's logging in here. Got Alex, Michael. All right. So let me read some of your questions here. All right. Well, thanks, Midland. We're watching my earlier content. I do appreciate that. If you guys are logging in for the first time, this is part 4 of lubing, sizing, and putting this brass back into the stainless steel cleaning for the second and final wash. And we are giving away a t-shirt, so make sure you're watching this video. It's somewhere in this live stream. I am going to give this away with a little bit of a contest. I'll give you guys some instruction how to win here. But you got to make at least one comment or ask a question in order to win. So if you're watching, make those comments and let those questions rip. I'll try my best to answer them. So when it comes to headspace, I personally like to use bump gauges. Bump gauges that you attach to your calipers. I don't like to use case gauges. I'm not one to use a black magic marker and put black magic marker over the shoulder and feed it into the rifle and see if it wears off or whatever. Use a lighter and get some black residue on the shoulder and feed it in, and I might, see if it wears off and see how my headspace is, and that might work for a bolt action, but you don't get that luxury with a semi-automatic. And these bump gauges, this particular one is a Hornady bump gauge. I know Sinclair used to make them, but I think most guys right now just use the Hornady bump gauges, and it's my preferred method. And I've always said you reload for your chamber or your particular firearm. You don't reload for a case gauge, and that's why I particularly like to use a bump gauge, and I'm going to show you that here in a little bit. So when you fire that round in your chamber, that brass expands, it seals in the chamber, and that brass is custom sized for that particular firearm's chamber, and it might spring back just a little bit, not much, but if you're new to the reloading community, that's called fire form brass, and that's what you want. You want fire form brass, and that way you can measure off that fire form brass, and you can bump your headspace back. For example, in a semi-automatic, you want to bump it typically 0.003 to 0.005, or bolt action, you want to bump that headspace back 0.001 to 0.002, and by doing so and using a bump gauge like this, you can repeat that headspace bump the next time you size that brass. And more times than not, you're able to set that die and not have to worry about it again if you only have one firearm. But if you have multiple firearms, like a 223 and a 5.56, you might have to play around with these dies and the headspace a little bit unless you buy another die set and you buy that specific die for that specific rifle if you're going for the ultimate precision. It's one thing if you're just making spray and pray ammo and you want to turn this into a true progressive press, and then so be it. You can bump that headspace more towards what you get, factory wise, and get right off the shelf for headspace. And I can't stress this enough. Headspace is ultra important when it comes to the reloading process. So what you can do, I've seen guys do this before for a bolt action. You don't get that luxury with a semi-automatic. Is if you really want to play with your headspace, I've seen guys do this, and I've done this myself, but for me, I just like to use bump gauges. It makes it easy for me. Is they will take a piece of brass and they'll make a dummy round, and they'll pop out that primer. They won't put any powder in it at all. The crucial part when I say making this dummy round is they'll trim the brass, and you got to make sure you trim that brass to its minimum amount, because you want to make sure that that brass isn't too long and hitting the throat, and you want to base this completely off the headspace itself. And they will put that piece of brass in their bolt action, and they'll close that bolt, and they'll try and close that bolt down, and they can feel that tension, that headspace. If there is no headspace, or the headspace is too long, they can't close that bolt. And they'll take that piece back out, and typically what I'll do is I'll use some brake cleaner, non-chlorinated brake cleaner. I'll clean that up and re-lube it back up with some Imperial case wax, and they'll size it down just a little bit, and they'll run it again, and they'll notice, man, I can almost close that bolt, but it's not closing yet. It's getting close, but it's not there. And they'll take that back out, and they'll repeat that process, and they'll put that back to the sizing die, and they'll screw it down a little bit, and they will bump that headspace back just a little bit more, and it doesn't take much. They're just turning that die maybe about a quarter turn, and they'll clean it back up so you don't get lube in your chamber, and they'll feed that back into the bolt here, and they'll close it, and they can close that bolt, but there's a tremendous amount of tension there, and they'll repeat that process until they can just barely close that bolt. And some guys, I've seen it where they can just barely push it down, and some guys where it's, it's pretty easy. And I've seen guys do that before, and that's fine. If that's your method, so be it. But for me, I just like to make it simple and easy, and I like to just use a bump gauge. Now, why do I prefer a bump gauge over, say, something like a case gauge? Well, case gauges, they are typically used for the absolute, minimum headspace. It's based on the factory SAMI specs that will feed them damn near every firearm known to man out there, and it's not custom sized for your chamber. And that's why I like to use these bump gauges, because I said you don't reload for a case gauge, you reload for your firearm and your chamber. And what this bump gauge does, if I can bring up this diagram here again, is, I'll take this off. By the way, this is your anvil, and this is the bump gauge itself. And what the bump gauge does, I don't know if you guys can make this out, but the gauge rides on the datum line of your brass cartridge, which the datum line is the midpoint of the shoulder. And they have different inserts that you can insert into this collar, and it measures right off, I don't know if you guys can make that out or not, but it measures off that datum point. And all this bump gauge is doing is telling you if you bump the brass, and that's it. It's not really a specific measurement. If I was to size this brass and you went out and bought the exact same calipers, the exact same bump gauge, and I was to give you this piece of brass and you put it in your setup, it doesn't mean it's going to come out at exactly, for example, this has been fired out of military firearms, so this headspace is extremely high. It's 1.461. And if I was to give you this piece and you had the exact same calipers, same bump gauge setup, it could be a little off. All this bump gauge is telling you if you are bumping that headspace. That's it. And in this particular situation, have some ammunition here. Half of it I fired, and half of it I haven't. And these 50 pieces here, 100% have been fired out of my Rock River Arms 20-inch varmint bull barrel. And so I know for a fact that this brass is expanded and has been custom sized to that particular firearm. And let me grab this firearm again. So this ammunition was fired out of this firearm, and when this round went off, it expanded to this rifle's chamber, and this brass is fire form for this chamber. It's not fire form for my DPMS 3G1. It is specifically for this Rock River Arms 20-inch varmint bull barrel chamber. And I can measure that fire form brass, which is the holy grail. Fire form brass is the holy grail. That's what you set all your measurements off of. Now, before I measure this fire form brass that was fired out of that rifle that I am reloading for right now, always pop out the primer before you measure the headspace with your bump gauge. And the reason why is sometimes that primer might have maybe a crater primer if you're looking at signs of overpressure, and that cratering can give you a false reading with this bump gauge and the anvil. You know, if you got a crater primer, that crater primer is going to hit this anvil. It's not going to give you a correct reading. So before I put it in here, and you can see right now, this brass is fire forming out of that Rock River Arms 20-inch varmint bull barrel at 1.4565. I don't know if you guys can make that out or not. Let's see if we get this a little bit closer here. So it's fire forming at 1.4565. So I'm going to quick pop out that primer. And that's super crucial that you guys do that. And that's why we do that right out of the gate, like we did in part 1. Not only for making sure we get clean primer pockets, but so we get accurate readings with our bump gauge, and also when we go to the sizing part of the reloading process, that we get a consistent headspace bump. So I'm just gonna quick pop out this brass. Now this, mind you, this brass obviously was fired out of my rifle. The brass that we're reloading was not fired out of my rifle. This was most likely fired out of a military grade, probably like an M16 or something. They're all matching headspace, Lake City, same year, 05 brass. And I guarantee you, I don't even have to measure this to know that this brass probably has an insane headspace, way too much that that rifle could ever handle. And if I was to reload this brass without bumping that headspace, I guarantee you, either one, it's not going to feed at all, or that round is going to get stuck in that chamber, and I'm not going to have a hell of a time getting it out. So keep that in mind. We're reloading right now once fired Lake City brass that I bought offline. So this is what was fired out of my rifle, and this is what I bought offline that wasn't fired out of my rifle, most likely an M16. Somewhere's in the service that someone collected and sold it in bulk. So before we do anything, I'm just going to put a quick mark on the brass that was fired out of my rifle so I don't lose track of which one's which. We are going to pop the primer out of both of these. Okay, so first things first, before you guys do anything, is to verify that the battery in your calipers is fresh. It's not dying on you. Make sure you don't have oil on your calipers. That can give you false readings. And usually what I'll do is I got this one piece of brass laying around. I know for a fact that this piece of brass is 1.750 inches long. And before I do anything, every single time I reload, I pick up this piece of brass and I zero out my calipers. And I know for a fact that this piece of brass is 1.750 inches. And that's exactly what it is. I don't know if you guys can make that out, but it's 1.750. And that tells me right out of the gate that my battery is fresh, my calipers are reading accurately, so I can get an accurate headspace bump. Now, here's the piece of brass that was not fired out of my rifle. This is the military Lake City brass in 5.56 and an 05 year. And let's measure that, and I'm going to tell you, I bet money the headspace is outrageous on this thing. Typically is. So let me get my headspace bump gauge on here. Okay, so I got my anvil on, my bump gauge. Obviously, you got to zero out your calipers. That's super important, obviously. So we're just going to double check this. So we're at 0. Now, this is the brass that I bought online, most likely out of M16. And look how outrageous this headspace is. It is 1.460. I'm going to look at my screen to see if you guys can make this out here. And that is an insane headspace. That headspace would never work in any factory rifle. It just won't. And typically, military grade firearms, especially fully automatic ones, will have outrageous headspace chambers on them for a couple reasons. One is you're in the middle of battle and you got full auto fire consistently, your chamber's expanding, everything's hotter than hell, and you got to make sure that that firearm functions and feeds no matter what you feed into it. And they typically have very generous headspace on them. The chamber might even be worn out. And that's why the headspace on this thing is so outrageous. And see, I can repeat it again. 1.461. Now, here is the brass that I think this is on its, let me double check. Yeah, so this is on its second firing here. So I've already been through this process with this batch that's already been fired out of that firearm. And that headspace is, and usually when I put the brass in the bump gauges here, I'll spin it a little bit. I'll get you a consistent reading, and that's 1.456. So what I'll do is I'll spin that a little bit. So it's about 4.555, 4.56. So that tells you right out of the gate, and you're not assuming with the case gauge, you know for a fact the difference between the headspace on these two. Now, if I was to reload this ammunition that's already been resized, reloaded, and fired out of that firearm, you can see that it has re-expanded to 1.456. Now here's the actual headspace card I have that I typically bump for that firearm, and you can see right there 1.453. So we're going to bump the datum line or the headspace of this brass to 1.453 from fire formed of 1.456. That's going to give you a bump of 0.003. And if you're going for the ultimate precision for a semi-automatic rifle, like I said before, you usually want to bump that headspace back 0.003 to 0.005. And for a bolt action, it's usually 0.001 to 0.003 from fire form. And some guys I know don't even do any headspace bump. They just neck size only, and that's fine. That's just, if that's your method, that's fine. And a lot of those guys are going for the ultra precision. But for me, I just full length resize everything. I just like to keep it simple, stupid. So I'm just going to quick read some of your comments here. I know I've been blabbering a lot here, so let's see what we got. Got Tal 300. Hello. How's it going, buddy? So Midland saying take out the ejector and the firing pin and you'll get a better feel on the bolt. And he's got a darn good point, especially if you're reloading for a bolt action. You're not using bump gauges, you're using the feel of the bolt itself. And you know, you're sizing that brass and it's not closing, you're resizing, you bump that headspace for more and that bolt goes down a little bit more. And so you take it back out, you resize it, and you bump that brass down a little bit more by screwing that die down, and it finally closes. I've seen a lot of guys do that, and it's just all about getting your own method to your madness. So, Richie, looks like you just rolled in here. Says same here, only full length resizing, and that's fine. It's like I said, it's all about your own method to your madness. This is your reloading journey. This happens to me, mine, and I'm not telling you to follow what I do. You got to find your own journey, and you know, it's what you find to be comfortable for you. But for me, this is just what I do. I'm not telling you this is what you should do, and that's why when it comes to headspace, it really is that big white elephant in the room, and is typically the most frustrating part of reloading, hands down. For the new reloader, I've had new guys that are new to reloading call me up screaming and pulling their hair out about, I just can't figure out this headspace thing. Can you come over? And I usually have to go over there and set them straight. So I gotta get some water here. Let me read some of your questions. So if you've got any questions, make sure you let them rip. You also got to make a question or comment if you guys want to win this t-shirt. So we're going to do that here sometime during this video. So you guys have any questions? Any guys that are new? Before we move on here on what I've covered so far and why I don't like using case gauges. I think bump gauges is definitely the way to go. It makes it quick, simple, and easy, and it's accurate, repeatable, and you know what's going on. You're not guessing, so that's super important. All right, what else we got here? So I think that's enough of the BS. Let me pull out my decapping die here. Now for 223, I use Hornady dies. Everyone's got preferences on what dies they use, whether they're Redding or Hornady or RCBS or whatever. It's whatever floats your boat. You know, I usually own mostly Redding, especially for their competition dial seaters. I really like those. They're awesome. But, you know, for 223, never had an issue with this 223. The neck tension's really good. And like I said before, my previous parts, I don't crip my precision rounds, even for semi-automatic. You're probably wondering why I just took my die set out. It's in a Ziploc bag if you're just starting to watch the video. Just a quick tip here. If you don't want a speck of rust on your dies, put your dies in a Ziploc bag with a chunk of cardboard or an index card and spray a bunch of WD-40 inside that Ziploc bag, and those dies will never rust. And it's the way to go, in my opinion. So you got two dies here. Obviously one's your sizing die and one's your cedar die, which you're not using the cedar, we're just using the resizing die. Now if you already decapped your brass with the decapper, which is the lead decapping die, I don't know what the heck I did with that. And by the way, on the lead decapping die, the lead decapping die works for damn near any cartridge with 223, 30-06. It can even be dirty, and dirty the better. Not really, but it could be dirty. Then I don't know if you guys can make this out, but it's got a pretty huge diameter here to accept almost any cartridge known to man. And all this is for is decapping that brass like we did in part 1. So it's just another note here I want to let you guys know. So get this out of the way. So if you've already decapped your brass, you really don't need to have this pin here. You can actually take that out for popping out your primers. I leave it in. Once in a while I do progressively reload, where typically when I'm progressively reloading, I'm making spray and pray type ammo. I'm not making precision ammunition for my record arms. And I will turn this progressive press into its true nature, a progressive press. But when I'm doing precision rounds, I'm kind of taking the progressive nature out of this press and I'm using as a single stage press. I use some parts for progressive, which you're going to see here, and you've also seen it in the decapping part. You know, for me, like I said before, I just full length resize. And one really important note I want to make here, especially if you're new, is if you're reloading for a semi-automatic, it absolutely needs to be full length resized. You don't have an option. For a bolt action, you can full length resize or you can neck size only, and that's up to you. If you want to go for the ultimate precision, I know some guys will neck only, and they want to keep that brass as close to the chamber size as possible. That round goes off, that brass expands, and the quicker they can get that brass to expand and seal in that chamber, the better. That's less gas leaking out, more gas going down the barrel, more consistent velocities, and they're lowering those SDs down, and they're getting the ultimate precision out of their bolt action rifle. And that's a really good reason why bolt actions have a tendency to be more accurate than semi-automatics. Other than trying to run a semi-automatic and dealing with that recoil, that is a huge benefit for the bolt action. And the reason why you have to full length resize, give that extra headspace of 0.003 to 0.005 on a semi-automatic in comparison to maybe doing neck only with damn near no headspace on a bolt action, is you got to make sure that semi-automatic functions. And obviously you don't get the luxury of feeling that headspace. You don't get the luxury of going, oh man, I think the headspace is too much. That bolt is rammed home with force and a lot of kinetic energy. And you got to just simply make sure that that bolt can function and, you know, eject and strip a new round off the magazine into the chamber. And you got to make sure that you're allowing some tolerances there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say for a semi-automatic, and that's why it's important. So let me read some of your questions here. So AR Precision, I use the Mighty Armory Decapper. That's really good. So yeah, keep those comments and questions rolling in, guys, and we're getting close here to lubing up this brass and actually sizing the brass. Now keep in mind, I've never done this live, so I don't know exactly how this is gonna go, but what the hell? I mean, I'm all about having some fun here. So let those get those questions out there, make those comments, especially if you want to win that t-shirt, guys. So see here, what else do we got here? Now when it comes to lube, I don't care what lube you guys use, if you spray or whatnot, but if you're not using Imperial case wax, you're not doing it right, in my opinion. This stuff is the bomb. It is the gold standard of any type of lube or wax. If you got to spend the extra money for it, spend the extra money for it, because nothing really compares to Imperial size and dye wax. For me, regardless if it's bolt action or semi-automatic, I like to use a spray case lube. I use a Hornady's One Shot, the Dynaglide Plus, the case lube, along with the Imperial case wax. And I'm going to show you that here in a little bit. Make sure I'm not mixing up my stuff here. Okay. So I can tell this is out of there because it's Lake City '05 brass. So that's just newly annealed. So that's good. So let's get this going. We're going to get this lubed up. I'm going to show you my method of doing a quick lube. So got to work with me. This is all new to me. So let's make some space here. All right, so here is our brass that we just got done annealing. What I like to do is use a popcorn bowl. And like I said, got to use the Imperial sizing die wax. I like to use the Hornady one-shot case lube. Now, this is my method of lubing my brass. Now, you got to be careful when you lube your brass. Either you're going to use too little, and you guys are going to learn how to use this really quick. If you use too little or you don't use any at all, you're going to quickly learn how to use a stuck case removal tool, and your brass case is going to get stuck in your die. And what this is if you get a piece of brass stuck in your die because you didn't lube it enough or didn't lube it at all, it is no joke. You're going to drill and tap out the end of that piece of brass, and you're going to screw in a bolt, and you're going to force that piece of brass back out of that die. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I've seen guys to the point where they got to throw away the die because they didn't lube it correctly, or put no lube at all on there. So I'm just going to quick read some of your questions here. So AR Precision, first time watcher, nice seeing you, buddy. So Richie, I always laugh when you start laughing during your videos. Yeah. Hey man, it's all about having fun. I've always said this about reloading. If you reload to save money, don't even get into it. You reload because you got a passion for it, and you reload because you enjoy it, and you reload because you want to get the ultimate precision out of your firearm. So looks like you guys don't have any other questions, so I'm going to get this going here. So if you guys can't see anything or you need some more lighting, let me know here, because this is all live. So usually what I like to do is, before I do this, I mentioned about not having little to no lube. Now, you can put too much lube on your brass. Now, if you put too much lube on your brass, typically what will happen is you'll start to see dents in the side. Usually they'll show up on the shoulder or on the side of the body. And the reason why is you're using too much lube, and you're getting air pockets in there, and the air can't go anywhere, and the only way it's going to go somewhere is to dent the side of the brass casing itself through hydraulic pressure. And that's no joke, and you don't want those. You want just the right amount of lube so it doesn't get stuck in your die, but not too much. So this isn't your happy place. Don't use too much lube. So anyway, what I like to do here is I'll get a little bit of Imperial case wax on the tip of my finger, and it's a small amount. It's not a lot. We're not talking, Michael Knisley, a handful amount of lube here. We're only talking a little bit on the tip of your finger. And what I'll do is I'll put that in the palm of my left hand, and I'll spread that around. Then what I'll do is make sure you shake up your spray lube, this one shot. Get it nice and mixed up there, and I'll spray that on my hand, and I'll just dust my brass. I don't go to town on it, just lightly dust it. You don't go to town, just a little bit. And I'll work the brass with my hand that has Imperial case wax on it. Nice seeing you, Thorzax. Nice seeing you join in the conversation, buddy. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm working that case lube off my hand. I'm working this Imperial dye sizing wax off my hand. So I'll spray a little bit more on my hand. And I'm just going to spray a little bit more on the brass. You don't want to spray the brass down, drench it down right away. You want to work it. Hey, Michael, should I add some more lube? Should we go to Michael Nicely approved amounts of lube? Now what you're doing here by working the brass, and this is a quick method of getting brass to cover not only the entire body, but you're getting on the shoulder and the neck. You're just getting that lube all over the case body. And I'm going to show you here in a little bit how we get a little bit of imperial case wax in the mouth by using the Q-tip on the first initial piece of brass. Maybe every 20th piece. I'm going to show you that here in a little bit. But right now for this, we're just concerned about getting that lube to cover consistently, and we're going back to that word again, consistently, to cover the whole exterior of that piece of brass. And I'll sometimes just work it out. Now, typically on the smaller cartridges, you don't need as much lube. I find on the the larger cartridges, like 308 and above, you need just a little bit more. But like I said, don't use the Michael Nicely overextended amount of lube. You want to use just the right amount. You don't want those air pockets showing up on that brass. Now what you should do, if you use any type of, one-shot spray lube or any type of spray lube, you should let it sit a little bit. Typically what I'll do is to speed that process up a little bit more. I'll actually use an air hose. That stuff falling all over the place around here. Use an air hose. And I'll usually pick up a piece and just make sure one random piece feels like it has an even, consistent amount of lube on it. So I'm just going to clean off my bench here. Just give me a second. Doesn't that work nice? Put the popcorn bowl full of soon-to-be sized brass right between my legs. All right. So let me see if I can get you guys a little closer here so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so I'm just going to get a quick card. All right, so like I was showing earlier in this video, this purchased, not fired out of my rifle, Lake City brass. It was typically fired out of most likely an M16 or something. That fire formed out of that rifle's chamber at 1.461. Can you guys make this out here? Just let me know in the comment section. And brass that does fire form and eject, oh, I almost said eject, eject out of my Rock River Arms 20-inch varmint bull barrel. Fire forms out of my specific rifle at roughly 1.456 to 1.457. It's never going to be exactly perfect, but it's damn near spot on. 95% of the time, it's usually 1.456 when I'm using a bump gauge. And this is the brass that we just got done annealing. So I'm going to spin this a little bit so you can see it's 1.456. I'm going to grab another piece out of this brass we just got done annealing. You can see, oh, that's got a heavy ding on the side. I guess I didn't sort that one out well. I'm definitely going to have to get rid of that one. So this is brass that I purchased, is fired out of the M16 most likely at 1.460. Brass that was fired out of my Rock River Arms at 1.455, roughly 1.456. Can you guys make that out there? So we need to bump this brass that I bought online not only past the fire form, obviously, of my rifle, but down 0.003 past that to 1.453. And that's what we call our target headspace. So purchased online, ejected out of my rifle, and fire form for that particular rifle's chamber for headspace. And this is our target headspace. We're going to go past this 0.003. So on this initial set of Lake City brass that I purchased online, we got to go all the way from 1.461 down to 1.453. Now, when I reload this ammunition and I shoot it out of my firearm again, it's going to custom size and expand to this measurement, and all we have to do is bump it back down to 0.003. Now, on your first set of brass that you purchase online, you're bumping this a considerable amount. I mean, in this situation, we are bumping it 0.007 to damn near 0.008, and that's a long ways to bump brass. I'm sorry, my Reynolds is kicking in from my radiation treatment. Sorry. The blood just stops flowing in my fingers. But anyway, but once we shoot that ammunition out of that rifle, it's going to bump, it's going to custom expand and fire form to 1.456, and we just got to rebump it back down to 1.453. We're just going to bump it 0.003. It really is that easy. And some guys just overcomplicate it. It's just, all this gauge does is tell you how much you're bumping it. It's not giving you an exact measurement, and that's it. And like I said, if you went out and bought the exact same calipers, exact same bump gauges, and I gave you this piece of brass, and mine's gonna show 1.460 because it's brand new Lake City brass that I bought. Yours might show 1.462 or something, but it's going to be really close, but it's not going to be perfect. The name of the game here is just using your bump gauges to tell you that you have bumped that headspace, and that is it. Don't overcomplicate it. So that is our target headspace, and on that first round of sizing, more times than not, you only have to run it through the ram once. But once in a while, you'll get that that one piece of brass that's just won't bump all the way down to 453, and it can be, you know, pretty stubborn. Sometimes you got to run it through the die twice. So I'm not sure if I'm going to exactly take you through all 200 pieces here, but I'm going to take you through at least, you know, 20, 30 pieces and show you an example of what's going on here. Now, I know some guys, what they do is they just put in their die and they let it touch the plate and they turn it a quarter. If you're doing that, you don't know what you're doing. What can happen if you don't bump that brass, the headspace can actually grow. And I'm going to show you here in a little bit how that headspace can actually grow. If you don't bump that headspace, you don't push that datum line back, the headspace can actually grow. Now, why is that? It's because you are not hitting the die on the datum line, and that brass needs to go somewhere. It's reforming the body into spec, and that brass will get pushed forward. And if you don't bump that brass back, that headspace can actually grow, and it can make it even worse. So it's super important that you're using your bump gauges to show you that you are bumping that brass. So I'm going to quick read some of your questions here. All right, so I'm going to just move this camera a little bit more. You guys see everything all right? All right, so I reset this die. So I unscrewed this. I have a Hornady lock and load press. Now, if you got a different press, it's going to be completely different. So make sure you're reading those directions. If you got a Hornady, RCBS, Dillon, Lee, whatever it is, make sure you're reading those directions. Obviously, this is going to be completely different, but if you have the Hornady lock and load progressive press, man, you're in luck. My main concern here is just to show you guys how to get a consistent headspace bump, and that's my main objective here. So make sure you're reading those press directions and you're reading your die directions. That's ultra important. Now, in my case, I use the Hornady lock and load press. So it uses these bushings, so they're interchangeable, so they're quick set, and I can just pop them in and I'm done. I don't have to screw it all the way down. But that's just this particular press. If you got a different press, it's going to be completely different. You got retting dies, make sure you're reading those directions. I got Hornady dies here. It's a little bit different. So let me just read some of your comments here. Okay, so, all right, so I've reset this. I actually had this set for my particular headspace, but I reset this just to show you guys how it works. So I'm going to put this in my press, and for me, at least, I like to raise the ram, and I just screw it down till it touches, it hits my shell plate. Now, I got a progressive plate, so it has a progressive shell plate. If you got a single stage press, you're going to have a completely different shell plate, so keep that in mind. So that's why you got to make sure you're reading your press's directions here. That's super important. So, okay, so raise the press, screw down my die till it touches, and now this is the name of the game. This is the most important part of the entire reloading process, especially if you want precision ammunition. And at least for my press, this particular Hornady lock and load progressive press, in order to get a consistent headspace bump, and really for any press, it's all about how you run your handle and your ram. This is obviously called the ram, your handle. And getting consistent headspace bumps along with your annealing. It's all about how you run your ram. You know, on one pole of the ram, you don't want to like push it down really hard and the next time barely push it down. You're going to get inconsistent headspace bumps. And inconsistent headspace bumps is inconsistent headspace on your reloaded ammunition. So it's super important that you're running this press consistently. I keep on bringing up this word, consistent. Just like shooting your firearms, it's just the same way with running your press. It's all about consistency. Now, if you do have a Hornady lock and load press, you pretty much have two options, in my opinion, for getting a consistent headspace bump. One is you're not so aggressive on how far you screw down your die, and you press pretty darn hard on your press handle. The other method is to be more aggressive on screwing down your die and what's called over camming your press. Now, when I say over camming, I'm going to kind of exaggerate this to show you what over camming is. But if the die is just touching the shell plate here and it bottoms out, now if I screw this down, exaggerated, you can see it bottoms out, but you can see I can still go, and that's called over camming. See how it kind of snaps past? That's called over camming. And at least for me, I have found that if you want a consistent headspace bump, usually what I'll do is I'll over cam my press a little bit. And, you know, you can run it down, push down really hard on the handle, but it seems like you don't get consistent headspace bumps. Typically what I like to do is get it so it just over cams. And when it over cams and bottoms out, I stop. Don't put any pressure on it. It just over cams and stops and bottoms out. I don't put any extra pressure on the handle at all. The second over cams, I stop. And the second it bottoms out, I pull back up. And you got to do that on every single piece of brass if you want consistent headspace. It's super crucial, at least for this press. And if you got like a Dillon, if you got RCBS, you got a Lee or whatever, it's going to be completely different. And you're going to have to find your own journey and trying to learn how your press works. And this is 100% probably the most frustrating part of reloading, hands down. And I know when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I was like, man, am I just not doing, am I not screwing this down enough or what? But after a period of time of learning how to nail and running this ram properly, making sure I got consistent amounts of lube all over the case body, the shoulder, the neck, inside the neck with a Q-tip. I'm going to show that here in a little bit. It's 100% the name of the game here is consistency. I keep on falling back to that word. So let's get going here. So in this situation, my press and my dies, I'm going to lower the ram, screw down my die. It's touching the plate now. Now I'm purposely going to back this off the plate, and I'm going to show you why if you don't hit that datum line, you don't push that brass back, you don't bump that brass, you're going to watch this headspace grow. And I'm purposely going to back this off and see if we can make this headspace grow. So you can see my calipers is zeroed out. Can you guys make that out there? And this piece of particular Lake City brass that I bought offline has got an outrageous headspace on it. It's got 1.462 inches. And we need to bring that brass headspace down to 1.453, and that's a long ways to go, boy. I'm telling you, that's big time. I might have to run that brass to that die maybe twice, at least on the initial set of brass on this Lake City brass, because we're bumping it so far. Remember, this isn't fired out of my firearm. This is fired out of a military grade fully automatic weapon, and that's why it's got such a generous headspace. So on this initial set of brass, I might actually measure every single piece of brass that comes off this die, but once I get to the second round, after I fired all those reloads, and I only have to bump it 0.003, I might check every 30th piece of brass. You know, once it's consistent, it's pretty consistent, and I'm not bumping that back. It's only bumping it back 0.003 from fire form. But like I said, in this case, this isn't my firearm. This is Lake City brass fired out of a military grade from 1.461 down to all the way to 1.453. So I'm just going to read some of your questions here. So Midland, sorry to see you have to take off here, buddy. Sorry. Norway, wow. Thor's axe. My Dylan is too weak to overcam. Doing that is too hard in the linkage. I have an old rock chucker for that sort of work, and that's exactly the point I'm trying to make here. Your process, just like your ex-girlfriend, they're all different. So forget that. And you just gotta learn how to work them a little bit. You gotta learn how to work each press. They're all different. So anyway, so let's get this going now. Like I said, I purposely backed this off. I'm going to see if I can get this headspace to grow. So this piece of brass is lube. Now on your first piece of brass, we got to make sure we put Imperial case wax on it. Now why do you put Imperial case wax on your first piece of brass? This is what's called conditioning your die, and you do it on the first piece of brass, and I usually only do it on my first piece of brass, and you just get the most minute amount of Imperial case wax on that finger. It's not a lot. We're not talking Michael Knisley going crazy on the lube type lube. Just a little bit. Doesn't take much. You just got to cover that up really good with Imperial case wax. Because what's going to happen is you're going to condition this die for your reloading session, and you want this initial amount of Imperial case wax to rub off on the inside of this die, so when you put in the other pieces of brass, that Imperial case wax is already covered in the inside of that die. Now also what I like to do on the first one, and about every, depends on how stubborn the brass is being, but I will put some Imperial case wax in the inside of the neck. Now, the reason why you do that is you want to make sure you coat that pin in there with Imperial case wax too. And I usually just do that on the first one. But depending on how stubborn the brass is, 223 is pretty easy to move on the brass, but huge cartridges like 308 Lake City brass, I might, use Imperial case wax with a Q-tip about every, I don't know, 10 or 20, just depends. And you learn that over a period of time. But anyways, let's get this going. I'm going to show you that this headspace is most likely going to increase because I didn't bump the brass for guys that just like to screw down their die and touch the shell plate. So we're at 462. So let's run this through. I guarantee we're not going to bump the brass. And like I just, trust me, I've done this so many times. You can see the headspace actually grew. I went from 462 to 464. And that's because you did not bump that brass. And you thought it would just be cool, just screwing down that die until it touched the shell plate. Or you didn't set up your dies properly, or you didn't even use bump gauge like this with calipers because you're guessing. You don't guess in this situation. You're dealing with, propellants, and this can get dangerous, and that's why I'm telling you, I'm showing you how I reload. I'm not telling you how you reload. So you can see the headspace actually grew, and I'm spinning it, and it's not good. That'll get stuck in your chamber. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to screw this down some more, and we're going to see if we can start moving this headspace and this brass. So let's see if we move this brass headspace. You can see it's starting to move already. So we're going to spin this. Try not to get wax on your calipers. If you get wax on your calipers, you're going to start getting inaccurate readings. So you can see we started at 462. We didn't bump the brass, and the headspace actually grew. I went to 464 and I screwed it down some more. Now we're actually moving that datum line. We're moving that headspace, and now it's down to 460. So we're good. Remember, our target headspace is 1.453 from 1.461-ish. So it's a ways to go. So we're going to screw this down some more. Now I can see I'm starting to overcam here a little bit. And I'm overcamming, and it stops. And I stop there, and I back it off. I don't put any pressure on that. If I was, you're not going to get a consistent headspace bump. Now you can see we're moving the brass some more, and that's why I'm talking to you guys right now. We know what's going on. We're not guessing what's going on. So we're getting close to our target headspace. Remember, our target headspace here is 1.453, and my hands are so darn oily here. I gotta wipe off this wax. Okay, so we are at 457. Now, right now at 457, I am pretty much at the fire form headspace that comes out of my Rock River Arms 20-inch varmint bull barrel. It ejects, the fire forms and ejects out of that particular rifle. This rifle, not your rifle, this rifle. It ejects at roughly 1.456 to 1.457. We're right there, right where it ejects. So next time I reload this ammunition from 1.453, it's going to re-expand and custom size to that chamber that I know, because I have this piece of brass fired and ejected out of that firearm. I know I'm not guessing. But we're getting close to that target headspace. We need to go a little bit further down to 1.453. So I've been fondling this thing a little bit, so I'm going to put a little bit more case wax on it. Now we're getting close. We don't have to screw this die down that much more here. So I'm overcamming, and I stop and back it up. So you can see I didn't bump it enough, so we're going to screw down some more. Now this is the initial setting of your die. So you can see we're getting close. I'm kind of wearing off the lube on this thing, so I can get some more lube on there as I'm fondling this piece of brass. So we are right there, 453. So that is just about perfect. So that's our target headspace. I'm going to actually back this up just a little bit. I'm going to run one more piece. Now remember, we bumped that considerably to set this die. And we're right at that 453, so that's good. Get some of this wax off my finger. Now here's another piece. So we're starting at 460. So right there, 453. And I'm kind of just making fine adjustments here as I go. You'll notice as the Imperial wax kind of conditions that die, your headspace will change just a little bit. But yeah, 4.535. So this is the thing is you can drive yourself crazy trying to get the most perfect headspace bump, and it never will be perfect. And that's why I put on here our target headspace is 1.453 plus or minus 0.001. So if that's my target headspace, you know, if I can make every piece exactly 1.453, then so be it, man. That's awesome. You're making the most precision ammunition known to man, but like all people, no one's perfect. And no matter how hard you try to run that ram consistently, you're never going to get it exactly 453. It's either going to be, you know, most of it will be right there, but, you know, some might be a little over, some might be a little under. And the more you can try and make that headspace exactly 453, the better. So I'm going to just quick run another couple pieces here. So this one's good. Now, here's the other thing too. The second this piece of brass comes out of that sizing die, that's when you start babying your brass. You got to baby that brass. You want to make sure that I take the progressive nature out of this progressive press. I manually remove that piece of brass. I manually put it in my tray. I don't let it fall out. And the reason why is I don't want that piece of brass falling out and nicking another piece of brass, because the smallest amount of dent or nick in that case mouth opening means you're going to shave copper off that bullet when you try to seat it. And if you're going for the ultimate precision, I will manually take this out and set it in. And it's really important to make sure you baby that brass the second it's sized. Now, remember, this is Lake City brass. So I just ran this through and it didn't bump all the way down. The reason why, because I'm bumping an extreme amount. Remember, if I was to size this from ejected ammunition at 4.56 and I only had to bump it 0.003, more times than not, 99.999% of the time, you only got to run it once. But on this initial set of brass, I'm probably going to measure every single one, because you're moving that brass such an enormous amount that you can see it didn't bump all the way. But if I was, notice I didn't touch the die, I'm going to run it through once again, and I bet it's going to be right there at 453 because I ran it through twice. So yeah, right there, 453. So that initial set of brass on Lake City brass, you're moving that brass a long ways from 461 down to 453. And sometimes you got to run it through twice. And I've seen it especially on 308 Lake City brass for my AR-10s. Those can be really stubborn. On that initial set of brass, sometimes you got to run it through 3 times. But once it's been ran through and you got through that initial set of brass, and you got your fire form brass that's been re-ejected, and then you only got to bump it 0.003. Usually only got to run it through the die once, but that first initial set can be a little stubborn. So somebody read some of your questions here. So Thorazak's talking about horny machines, yeah, equal to 650. Man, I think if I was to start over and, you know, redo this again, I'd probably get a Dillon, and I would really like to get a Dillon 1050. They're very expensive, so you can afford it. You know, buy what you can afford, but try and get the best of the best of what you can afford. So let's read some of your stuff here. Just gonna quick double check this. I'm just going to double check this again. So we're getting close to locking down this die. It's pretty hard to lock down this die too off the initial set, and you got to make sure. I got a feeling we don't have enough lube on some of these pieces. You can tell, you can put a little lube on it and that brass will move right away. So I'm going to spray a little bit more spray wax here. It's a lot of pieces. It's not 100 pieces, it's 200 pieces. And you'll eventually get a method your mattis down. You get a feel of your brass and your press and the amount of lube that you need, and it'll eventually come together. And initially, if you're new, it's gonna drive you crazy. This part drives everyone crazy in their first time around. You just got to give it a chance. So pick another piece here. Yep, 4.525. So I went by a little bit, but that's okay. I'm in that 4.53 range, so that's good. Get some of this lube off my hands. So 4.53. We'll do a few more pieces here. I'm not going to take you through all 200 pieces because I'm sure you guys would be brain dead by the time I did that. So 4.535. So initially, what you might want to do here is to remember every about 10th piece, get a little imperial case wax inside one of those pieces. You're going to recondition that pin in there. Four, 5, 3. So you can tell I'm getting consistent headspace bumps. We're not guessing. We're not using a stupid case gauge. You're reloading for your rifle and your chambers. So I haven't sized this yet, so let's check this out. We got an enormous headspace here out of an M16 most likely at 4.62. So we're gonna run this through. We're getting close. I'm tuning this thing. You can see I'm kind of moving it around, backing it out, backing it back in as I size each piece initially. So 4.53. So here's another piece I haven't sized yet. So this one's not as bad, 4.58. So let's run that. All right, so 4.535. Now that's what you call consistent headspace bumping. That's what you should call consistent ammunition. So 4.58. All right, so 4.53, right at that target spot. We call that the sweet spot, the target headspace. So another thing I want to mention here, well, this one's outrageous. 4.66. That's insane. I mean, I'm pushing on this thing. 4.66. So we got a long ways to move on this bad boy. Remember, consistent pulling of that ram. That's super important. So you can see I had to move that brass a long ways, and that's why I didn't get down to my target headspace. So we went to 4.54, 4.55. So I'm going to rerun this because we had to bump that brass so far. So 4.535, and I can work with that. So on this first initial set of brass, it kind of sucks. You really got to go through every single piece on Lake City brass because it's not fired out of your firearm. It's fired out of most like an M16. It's got enormous headspace for a fully automatic weapon. And when you're resizing Lake City brass, whether it's 223 or 308, that first initial set of brass can be a pain in the butt. And the reason why is, number one, you got to swage it. You got to swage those crimp primers. Once you've done it, you don't have to do it again. You're good. I like to rim it after I swage it to make sure those crimp primer pockets are buttery smooth. Once you've done it once, you don't have to do it again. You have to uniform that primer pocket like I showed you. Once you've done it once, you don't have to do it again unless you have some crazy overpressuring and you're bulging out that primer pocket. It's not good. But you usually don't have to do it again. Now I kneel every single time, And now we're resizing this Lake City brass from an enormous headspace down to our target headspace. And sometimes you have to run it through that die twice. But like I said before, once I reload this and I shoot it back out of my firearm, this firearm here, that fire forms at 4.56, we're only moving that brass a little amount. We're talking 0.003. And 0.02 of an inch ain't much. It's hair thin and it's not much at all. So that's why your first initial set of Lake City can suck. Now, if you're reloading for a bolt action, now this is actually my Tikka, my T3X CTR and a 308 cartridge, and badass rifle. Love this rifle. It's awesome. I got my brake on here. I got my cheek pad. I got a vortex scope. This thing is a laser. It's awesome. You know what? Even though it's a 308 cartridge, I shoot nothing but Lake City 7.62 by 51 brass, and I have a whole bin of Lake City brass that even though I'm using Lake City 7.62 by 51 brass here, or military 7.62 Lake City brass, I'm bumping that tremendous headspace down to fit this 308 factory chamber, and it is a laser, and I have videos to prove it. You can go check out my playlist and the Tikka T3X CTR video series that I have on this thing, and I shoot nothing but Lake City out of this thing. And the reason why is because, number one, it's super cheap. Number two, that Lake City brass is heavy duty. I mean, it is crazy heavy duty, and it lasts forever, especially out of a bolt action. And why spend the extra money? And I suppose if you're going for the ultimate precision, I would probably get Lapua brass, if you're bench rest rifle shooting. But at least for me, I get very consistent sub-one-way results out of this with Lake City 7.62 military brass. And I don't buy any 308 Lapua brass for this thing at all. So let's read some of your questions here. AR precision, I use Elfster's technique, but also I do a reading instant indicators. Yeah. So he enforces buy. So Thor's X says not Elfster. He enforces buy what you can afford. So yeah, I'll always say don't buy a kit. Don't buy kits. Part out your reloading setup and buy the best that you can afford, and then upgrade individual pieces as you can afford it. Maybe right out of the gate, you don't want to do brass prep by hand. Trust me, just do whatever you got to do to use some type of Lyman case prep center. World's finest trimmers at a minimum. Otherwise you're gonna have arthritis in your hands. Trust me. So let's do a couple more pieces here, and then we'll get on with washing this brass, which I'm not going to do because obviously I still got to do this 200 pieces offline. But at least I'll show you what I do on the second round of cleaning. So about every 20th or piece of brass, I'll recoat it and recondition this, at least for initial set of purchased once fired Lake City brass. Sometimes that Imperial case wax will wear out of that conditioned die, because remember, you're moving this brass and you're moving a lot of brass and you're bumping a lot of brass on this initial set of Lake City. But once you get on your second fire forming and reloading, this process is way easier. So on this one we got 459. I'm just gonna recondition this neck a little bit. You can see as I put it in, I kind of rub a little wax around that piece. Okay, so now if this comes out at 453, I'm gonna set that die. So yeah, 453, right on the nuts here. So what we're gonna do to set your die, is I'm going to put another piece. Let's double check this measurement, 461. So we're going to raise this ram. I'm going to go past over cam, and I'm going to let it bottom out. And notice I don't put any pressure. I let it bottom out and sit. Now I'm going to lock this down. See this nut here? I'm going to lock this down. Right. Now, this die is set for that headspace, and it is set for that rifle. And, you know, I reload for a lot of 223 ARs that I have. I obviously have the Rock River 20-inch varmint bull barrel. I have my DPMS 3G1 223. I'll have a PSA 10.5-inch 223 or 5.56. And I've double checked the headspace on every single one of those 3 AR 223 or 5.56 AR rifles of mine, and they are pretty consistent at that 4.56. I think my 3G1 is 4.57. So for me, and I've double checked the headspace in all 3 of those ARs, and they're right in that neck of the woods, that 1.456. Then I can reload all my ammunition at 4.53 and shoot out all of those. And the first thing I do when I get a firearm is I actually take my calipers with my bump gauges to the range with me, and that very first piece, regardless of the firearm, if it's a 223 AR, it's a 308 bolt action, a 6.5 Creedmoor. I got other inserts here that I can take out, so you can undo this little Allen screw here, pop this insert out, and they have other inserts for other cartridges. Like this one works for 7.62 or 308 or whatever you want to call it. I actually put a black magic marker on here so it's easy to know which one's which. This one here is for 6.5 Creedmoor. We got 243, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you're doing, they got different inserts for whatever cartridge you're reloading for to measure your headspace. You're not guessing, you know. And I will take this thing out to the range with me, and that first thing I do, that very first round that comes out of that rifle, and that piece of brass ejects out of that firearm, that is gold to me. That tells me everything. It tells me the headspace that brass is fire forming. And what you can do is, if you don't have any brass, just go buy some factory ammunition and measure the headspace on it. Get a piece of factory ammunition, put it in here, measure that headspace, fire it, and get that piece of gold, that piece of fire form brass out of there, and measure that headspace and see how much that brass grows. And because that brass is custom expanding and sealing off in that chamber, and that brass will bump back a little bit, but not much. It is pretty much set for that chamber, and it will tell you instantly how much that brass is expanding. And that piece is gold. Don't lose it. Bring it back to the reloading room, and you're going to use that piece. And usually what I'll do is I'll make information cards that I put on my wall, and I have a whole book of Ruger Precision Rifle, 6.5 Creedmoor, Krieger Barrel, Fireform Headspace, Tikka T3X, CTR, 308, Fireform Headspace, whatever, whatever rifle, I got a book that I write all that Fireform Headspace down, so I know exactly what to bump that headspace back. Easy as that. So let's measure one more piece here. I'm going to do a couple more pieces, then I'll move on to the wash. We got 4, 5, 8. I remember, I still got a piece of brass in there. Let's measure that bad boy. So right there, 453. Man, it's just so simple once you know what the hell you're doing. So 454, so I'm going to run that through once more. So 4535. So I think we're good with that. So I think you guys kind of get the gist of what I'm talking about here. You guys got any questions? Let me know what's going on here. So Richie says Lake City brass is harder than what Becker's left. That is no joke, man. At least on the initial set of brass, like I just proved to you guys here. At least that first initial set of brass can kind of be a pain in the rear end. But once you get past that first initial set and you only got to bump it 0.003 fire form, it's pretty easy. So, yeah, keep those questions coming. And I think right now we are going to do the giveaway on the t-shirt. So what I got here is I have mediums, large, extra large, and double XL. So if those sizes don't fit you and you're a big boy or a small guy, you might want to just stay out of this round of giving away a t-shirt. But I got my Elfster's Rifles and Reloading logo on the back. And then I got the front that says America's one and only Homeland Security. And these are actual rifle silhouettes of my firearms. These are actually my PSA 5.56 10.5 inch AR pistols. This one in the middle is that very rifle right there. You can see, notice it's a spitting image. So right there. So that is my rocker. That is the exact silhouette of that firearm. This is the Rock River 20-inch varmint bull barrel. I got offset iron sights with a Vortex 416 FFP or first or front focal plane. And I got the PRS adjustable cheek weld stock. And this thing is an absolute laser. And I got the videos to prove it, along with my precision reloads. So yeah, here we go. So if you made a comment and asked a question, you're more than willing to join in here. So this is how it's going to work. Is right now I'm going to give you 1 minute. You got to pick one number from 0 to 10,000 and post it right now. And I'm going to give you 1 minute. And I got a random number generator here. So 0 to 10,000, I'm going to give you until 7:44, so a minute or so. So 0 to 10,000, I'm going to hit this generate, and whoever gets the closest to the generated number wins. And I'm going to send you this t-shirt with a nice note from Elfster's Rifles and Reloading, and I'll send it to you to free in the lower 48 states. If I got to send it out of the United States, you might have to pay the difference. But at least the t-shirt's free. So I'm going to let you guys generate some numbers here. I'm going to let these go by for a little bit. So make sure those numbers keep on rolling out. If you got any other questions, let them know. So I'm going to let these numbers generate a little bit, and then we're going to move on to what I do to wash this size brass for the second and final time. So AR Precision saying HEADSPACE is not complicated. New reloaders sometimes don't understand it. And they don't. And, to be honest with you, when I first started, I didn't know either. It really didn't. I mean, to be honest with you, it can be sometimes frustrating and complicated. And, yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm helping you guys out. So I'm going to give you guys about 1 more minute. If you got any other questions, make them known here so I can try my best to answer them. So DMM Racer 321, does annealing really make a difference? What about 308? I understand 5.56, is it a must? So yes, regardless of the cartridge, if it's 5.56 or 223 or 308 or 7.62, doesn't matter. I always nail. I really do believe, and I've seen it create more consistent headspace bumps. And not only do I think it creates more consistent headspace bumps, but I also think it creates more consistent neck tension. And if one piece of brass for example, your target headspace is 453, and you bump one piece of brass all the way down to say 1.450, and the next piece of brass is 1.456. That piece of brass that you screwed up on, that's 1.450, needs to expand that much further to seal off in the chamber. And if it has to expand that much further to seal off in the chamber, that means that much more gas is escaping out of that brass and is going backwards. And God forbid you bump that brass back way too far. If you bump it back way too far, you can get what's called, and God forbid it ever happens to you, you can get what's called case head separation, and it is not good. And that's usually when your rifle explodes. So yeah, I think we're good here. So I'm gonna hit the generator. We're gonna see who won here. So we're at 42.99. So let's see who's the closest here. It looks like Richie's pretty darn close. 42.99. I think Richie just won there, guys. Richie Gonzalez, I think you won, buddy. Yep. DMM Racer, you're pretty darn close at 5,000. Yep, I think you won there, buddy. So good luck there, Richie Gonzalez. I will send you that free t-shirt in the mail for free. What state you live in there, bud? Mr. Gonzalez there, what state you in there? If you didn't win, I definitely have more t-shirts that I do sell, shipped to lower 48 states for $26.99, shipped to lower 48 states. And if you want to buy one, jump on my Elfster's Rifles and Reloading page on Facebook and send me a private message and let me know that you're interested in what size you want, and we'll get some conversation going there. I can send you one. But yeah, congrats there, Richie. If you're still there, what state are you in there? I'm just curious. So you wear a large. That's awesome. What state you in there, Richie? So I'm not gonna bore you guys with the rest of this. I'm gonna do this offline because otherwise it'd be here all day long. Resizing brass, so I'll do that later. But what I'm going to show you is what I do right after this. Once, just envision we got 200 pieces of size brass here. So all right, Richie's in New Mexico, so I will. Richie, are you on Facebook? Let me know. So what we're going to do here is just envision this is 2,000 pieces of freshly sized brass, and we're going to put it back in our stainless steel tumbler here. Now, if you're not sure what we did on the first round of cleaning in part 1, go back and rewatch that. In essence, all we did on the first round of cleaning, just so we can get it annealed and sized, is we put hot water in here and we put Dawn only. Let me grab this. So we put Dawn only in that first round with the hottest water we can get out of our tap. And on the second round of cleaning, just to get the lube off, the reason why we're going to do the second round of cleaning is we got to get all this lube off this brass, and it's 200 pieces, and it's too much to do individually with brake cleaner. So if you have to do 1 or 2, you can just use brake cleaner. And we want to get, I know everyone's going for the shiny, sparkly brass. Let me tell you something. Shiny, sparkly brass doesn't make accurate ammunition. It just makes you happy that you have shiny, sparkly brass. That's about it. Stainless steel cleaning, it's great and all. But I do know some guys that don't use stainless steel cleaning, especially some really high-end precision riflemen that bench rest rifle shoot, world record setting holding guys that like to use walnut cleaning, and they like to leave a little bit of carbon in that neck. There's a little bit of a lube, and they don't crimp. They leave a little bit of carbon in there to get consistent velocities, and their results show it. For me, I just like to keep it simple, stupid. I just use stainless steel cleaning. But if you're going for the ultimate precision, you might want to check that out with walnut cleaning and a vibrating tumbler. Some of those guys, they actually don't use stainless steel wet cleaning. So that's something to keep in mind. But anyway, on the second round of cleaning, just to get this lube off, and it's our final round of cleaning, we're going to use hot water, the hottest water you can get out of your tap. Hotter the better. We're going to use Dawn. You don't have to use a lot. You know, don't go overboard. Otherwise, you're going to have suds galore. But on the second round, the big difference is I like to use Let Me Shine. This is kind of the gold standard of wet stainless steel cleaning. And this really puts a sparkle on that brass. It really makes it shine. But like I said, shiny brass doesn't mean it's accurate brass. Your accurate brass comes from your headspace and consistent reloading methods. So keep that in mind. That's super important. But everyone's got to have that sparkly brass, so that's why we're going to put it in here with the hottest water we can get with Dawn and Let Me Shine. Usually on the second round, I let it run for maybe an hour, hour and a half. That first round of cleaning, I usually only run an hour. You don't have to go any more than that, because all you're really doing is trying to get the brass clean enough to size and anneal. And that's why right out of the gate, we popped out the primers for consistent measuring of your headspace, consistent headspace bumps. We also popped out those primers right out of the gate for that first round of cleaning. And also on the second round of cleaning, you're giving those popped out primer pockets that much more time to get cleaned. And that's why you do it like I showed you on part 1. So yeah, I'm not going to put this in, obviously, because I still got to do this, but hot water, Dawn, Let Me Shine, and then about an hour and a half. Now, here's the key, if you don't want it to tarnish, is you rinse with cold water. The coldest water you can get out of your tap, you rinse it out off of cold water. Why is that? Well, usually a lot of people call them hot water heaters. It's kind of stupid. Just call it a water heater. There's no point in calling it a hot water heater if the water's already hot. You don't want to use water out of your water heater because there's a ton of minerals in there. There's lime buildup, there's scale. All that is in that hot water. And if you rinse with hot water, those minerals will tarnish your brass like that. So you want to rinse with cold, and that's why. The colder the better, and that will help from your brass tarnishing. So then, like I said, I'll usually run it for an hour and a half. So if you guys got any question, let me read your stuff here. Yeah, so Mark Hernandez makes a really good point. Some guys like to use car wash and wax to help bring down the tarnishing of the brass. It definitely does help, but like I said, shiny brass doesn't mean accurate brass, so keep that in mind. Now, after this runs for an hour and a half, I rinse it with cold water. If I'm in a hurry and I want to reload the very next day, I'll usually run it on my air hose like I did in part 1. Otherwise, if it's going to be several days until you get to the next step here, like 3-4 days, I'll just kind of shake the brass enough to get as much water out as I can. I just let it sit on my bench and let it air dry. Now, there are some people that use dehydrators. I know Lyman just came out with a Cyclone. That's pretty much a glorified dehydrator. It's got a timer on it, and it's specifically for drying your wet brass. It just came out of the wet stainless steel wash. I know some guys use toaster ovens. I've even seen guys throw their brass on cookie trays and throw it in the actual oven in the kitchen at usually 200 degrees or less. Those are all methods. Personally, I don't get that crazy. I either just spray it off like I did in part 1 with an air hose, or I just let it sit on my bench for a few days and get back to it later. And before I head out here, I just want to let you know, this is when you usually start your information card on your reloads. So usually what I'll do is I just get cheap index cards here. I like to put the date, you know, 200 rounds. If the headspace isn't specific for a particular rifle, I'm not totally worried about which firearm I run it through. You know, sometimes if I know this headspace is set for a particular rifle, you know, I might put like RRA 20-inch varmint. So I know to shoot that ammunition out of that firearm only. This is a once fired Lake City 5.56 brass. It's got an 05 stamp or 2005 year stamp brass. And by putting once fired, I know that I just bought that. That's actually not fired out of my firearm because it's Lake City. Now, if this was factory brass, I went with the Shields or Gander Mountain or something or whatever, and I bought factory ammunition, I'd actually put new. I put new brass, not fired yet. And this is a dead giveaway. This has been purchased because it's Lake City, so I just know that. Sometimes I'll put my sized headspace, and if I'm reloading for a particular rifle, I will put the Fireform headspace. So Fireform's at 1.456, and I resize that brass to 1.453 plus or minus 0.001. I also put the bullet that I'm eventually going to reload on here, 60 grain VMAX. I have shot damn near every 223 bullet out of my 223s, and this 60 grain VMAX just performs out of everything. That little flat base bullet's amazing. So I like to use CCI primers. In this example, it's a small rifle, so it's the number 400 small rifle primer made by CCI. I'm doing 23.8 grains of Varget, and the coal I haven't written in yet because that's going to be a future part here, so we're eventually going to get to that. Other than that, boys and girls, if you got any other questions, let them be known. I'm going to quick, hey, you guys like my Ruger SR 1911? Yeah, this is a sweet little pistol, I tell you. I'm going to read over your questions here. So, yeah, doesn't really look like you guys got any other questions here. If you got any, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to shut this down. And once again, thank you for joining me with Elfster's Rifles and Reloading. I'm just like you guys. I'll never say something I'm not. Never say I'm an expert, but I try my best to be one. I got to admit to you guys, the old YT, I can't even say their name, but the old YT is not making it easy on me with this Armageddon thing they're doing with content here. So if you can, please support me through Patreon. Jump on my Patreon account and throw a little money my way, because it's definitely not easy. The other ways you can support me is jumping on my Facebook page. I'm posting a lot of amazing deals on there. Deals that are hard to find, and if you do find a better deal, let me know. I'll take mine down and put yours up. The other way you can support me is through my t-shirts. So get a hold of me, Messenger, on my Elfster's Rifles and Reloading page. Send me a message. Let me know you want to buy a t-shirt. And once again, Richie Gonzalez, way to go on winning the t-shirt, man. I hope you like it. And I'll get that sent to you in the mail for free. So, did you say you're on Facebook there, Richie? Let me know right away. Are you on Facebook? Oh, Richie Gonzalez, are you on Facebook there, buddy? Well, if you're not, I'll get a hold of you through YouTube. We'll get together somehow. I'll get your information of where I need to send this t-shirt. Other than that, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you next time in part 5.